Good morning. This is Town Peterson. I'm talking with you from Lawrence, Kansas. This is effectively the 15th in our global online seminar series in biodiversity informatics. And although we've had quite an interesting series of talks kind of on the science side, I thought to take a break from science talks this month and give you all a little bit of an update on the Biodiversity Informatics training curriculum, which is let's say, the parent project within which the seminar series is being developed. Essentially, it's an effort to provide digital, online, open access, but rich and authoritative training materials, resource materials for very diverse analyses and efforts in biodiversity informatics. I'm going to share with you a presentation, and I'm going to trust that you will see this. Indeed, if anybody realizes that there's a problem with this broadcast, please let me know by email as soon as you can. So, I am assuming that you are seeing my presentation. Again, email me as soon as possible if that is not the case. The message is pretty simple. I'm asking you for input because there are a small group of us who are making this project happen. And there are times when we just need a check-in with the broader community. So there's an email address on your screen right now, biodivtraining@gmail.com. I would appreciate it if you would send me messages with questions and with input about this presentation and about the project more generally. So let's talk about biodiversity informatics just briefly. This is a field that is simultaneously very new and very old, which is to say it's very new in the sense that there are only recently are there large-scale data resources and tools and such that are specifically for the management of digital information in biodiversity. And at the same time, it's a very old field in that biodiversity professionals have been managing information, not always digital, but managing information about biodiversity literally for centuries. So we can argue about whether it's new or old. But what I can say is that for the field of biodiversity informatics, there are no textbooks, there are no syntheses that cover the whole field. There's no degree program that covers the whole field authoritatively, although maybe a couple are under development. So in that sense, this is a field that does not have a central point. There are certainly experts in managing the information and experts in analyzing the information, let's say towards conservation prioritization or towards distributional synthesis or some other use. But a synthesis, no. A second point is that we have no comprehensive training program, such as a graduate training program. And in fact, if you explore on the network, there's actually relatively few training resources. There's some very good points of light on the horizon, but nothing comprehensive. And at the same time, this field is not something that's just esoteric and of casual, let's say, academic interest only. Rather, this is a field of considerable importance in biology, in natural resource management, in conservation, et cetera, et cetera. So with a few colleagues a few years ago, I put together this sort of maybe a framework for thinking about this field. And what, there's not, maybe this is not the best visualization of biodiversity informatics, but it's at least a first idea of the complexity. So if you look at the blue boxes across the top, you see genotype and phenotype, you see biotic interactions, environment, and human effects. And those are essentially the major observable phenomena. There are then some, let's say, epiphenomena, phenomena that happen on top of the observable phenomena, like niche and population ecology and biodiversity loss. But then, with my colleagues, I identified a bunch of products. And some of these are things that are kind of old-time systematics, like phylogenetic trees and taxonomies. There's biogeography, like geographic distributions and range maps. There are the ideas of forecasting change, and there are things that are marshaling biodiversity information towards improved conservation of biodiversity. And so those are all in these yellow boxes. And then finally, in the black lettering that's scattered around this rather complicated diagram, you can see the sorts of data and the sorts of initiatives that are focusing on these different phenomena and these different products. So again, this isn't necessarily the best way to visualize biodiversity informatics, but it is at least an idea of the complexity. Now, another kind of guiding principle in this is the idea of information loss. And this diagram, again, it's a little complicated. But if you look at these gray boxes going around the edge, we see a flow of information. There's the world of biodiversity out there. And of that biodiversity, some portion has been sampled or studied. And of that, some portion has data records associated with it. That's this third box. Fourth is whether the data records have taxonomic determinations or identifications associated. Fifth is the idea of transitioning to digital format. Sometimes the information is born in digital format, but sometimes it's not there. Sometimes it's in the form of paper catalogs or labels. Then we have to talk about data cleaning and georeferencing, which are essentially ways that that one can update and improve the information and enrich the information. There is the idea of publishing the data, and especially publishing in standard formats, such that the data are broadly shared and integrated with the broader stash of biodiversity information, shall we say, out there in the world. Now, what I want you to see in this diagram is that only bits of information that make it all the way through this chain are usable. And that's what I've circled in red here at the end. But all of these blue circles represent opportunities for information to be lost. And this is essentially poor information management, poor information shepherding or stewardship. And I would guess that 95 to 90% of the information that was ever sampled, which is to say that ever got to this second box of sampled biodiversity, probably 95 to 99% of that information is simply lost and is not currently usable for science and for policy. And that's bad. So that's another important point about this field. And then a final point that I would make is that there's a flow of essentially what science gets done. And so I'd like you to look at this in this diagram where we see technology and data availability, but also ideas and concepts. And I would say, and this is certainly a controversial thing to say, but I would suggest that a lot of the ideas and concepts that have been explored in biodiversity informatics have been essentially what is doable, what is feasible, which is to say, given the technology and given the availability of data, what can we do? And I think rather it should work the other way around. That is, given the ideas and concepts, given the big questions, what technology needs to be developed and what data need to be made available. The technology and the data can then interact to make each other work better, but ideally, and this is these gray arrows in this figure, ideally what should be driving our work in this field should be the ideas and the concepts, and not simply what data did I happen to find or what tools did somebody happen to develop. So I'm just going to come back to existence for a moment. Here I am. So essentially, what are we talking about? We're talking about an important field, which is to say an important dimension of natural resources of the earth. We're talking about a field that has no synthesis or has no central resource or set of resources that one can consult. And I think perhaps as a consequence, we're talking about a field that doesn't always maximize and optimize its resources and its potential. So the program that I'm talking to you about today, it's called the Biodiversity Informatics Training Curriculum. And this is essentially the idea of taking advantage of some technology, taking advantage of some opportunities that simply didn't exist just a few years ago, and seeing if we can make some progress. Maybe we can't make full progress, but the idea is, can we potentially, at the very least, put out some more authoritative and more comprehensive resources so that people around the world can have access to this field and the interesting and amazing progress that's being made in it. So a couple or three opportunities that I would mention to you is, I really feel, personally, I feel that in-person interaction training is always the best. But at the same time, I do believe that we can get quite a bit done by mixing the in-person interactions with online interactions. We have some very simple technologies that I think can be very effective. For example, YouTube has huge usership, very easy access. It offers the opportunity for multilingual versions and subtitling. We have crowdsourcing platforms like .sub, which allow big groups to collaborate in translations. And essentially, unlike what we could have done 10 years ago, we can provide content globally for very little expense and without a whole lot of effort. Obviously, the effort is there in terms of sharing the resources and developing the resources and capturing the resources. But really, that content can be made globally available without a whole lot of work. So the idea that evolved through some very rich interactions with some very smart people, essentially my colleagues over the last 10, 15 years, is the idea of in-person training courses where every interaction gets captured digitally in terms of digital video. The digital video gets published via YouTube. The teaching gets transcribed to English subtitles. The subtitles get translated via crowdsourcing platforms into a whole bunch of additional languages. And then we provide additional information via web links, perhaps for download off of Dropbox. So that's essentially the 2012 to 2015 technology idea that we've been exploring. And so I proposed this idea to the JRS Biodiversity Foundation in 2012. JRS Biodiversity Foundation is a rather unique foundation that works to support research and even applied efforts to conserve biodiversity globally. Although its granting has been globally, its focus has been on Africa, and that will come back into this talk in just a second. So the proposal was submitted in early 2012. It was funded in mid-2012. And that initiated a set of in-person courses. The original vision was 9 courses to be held in 3 cities across Africa, but that has expanded. The online content has built massively. We're up around 800 videos available on YouTube. And the funding is bare bones through no fault of JRS Foundation, but rather because we're trying to do quite a bit. And so there's not extra money or extravagance at any point. It's simply enough to get a big job begun and maybe even to a first point of conclusion. So what have we done so far? Well, with a couple colleagues, I was able to sketch out essentially a framework of the major topics in this field of biodiversity informatics. And we broke that up into functional units, essentially units that could be taught in a week or 2 of intensive interaction. So, for example, we need some introductory material. I'm kind of going back to an information flow sort of thing, but a very first step in informatics is to be able to label things, and in biodiversity science we do that via species descriptions. So we taught in March of this year a 2-day course on how to describe new species. We also did a course in Accra a year and a half ago on capturing biodiversity data. This is that transition from analog data that are silent and shall we say dark to the science and policy applications into digital data that are wholly new and usable. We had a unit on data cleaning in Nairobi in 2013, and also a unit on data publishing in Nairobi in 2013. We've done a week-long course on ecological niche modeling, also Nairobi 2013. We've done a very interesting unit on essentially 5 other analyses to which biodiversity data can be put. That was taught in Cape Town in middle 2013. And that same occasion in Cape Town, we did a very interesting course on building biodiversity informatics institutions. So essentially, how do you make this an institution instead of just a single group or a single investigator? We just recently in Cameroon did a course on conducting biodiversity inventories, and that was a rather risky course because we did a week of classroom instruction and then a week in the field in a rainforest setting in Korup National Park. That was made possible by our partner Tropeg in Cameroon. But essentially, that was our first, shall we say, classroom and field venture. In Uganda earlier this year, we did a course on developing national biodiversity diagnostics. Essentially, can we do surveys or diagnoses of the status of biodiversity information of a country, of a taxon in a country, what have you. And that course is resulting in a special issue of a journal that I'll tell you about in a little bit. But the special issue is contributed by the students in the course. And then finally, and not yet done, is we have a course coming up in December planned for Ethiopia that will be essentially on conservation implementation. How do we take the conservation-related information that biodiversity informatics generates, and how do we translate that into conservation action? So what are these courses like? They are groups of instructors who come from around the world and from within Africa. This is Saingi Moses, who was one of the instructors in our course in Cameroon on biodiversity inventories. The courses are held in Africa and for the moment are restricted to student participation by people based in Africa. The instructors, again, come from around the world, although increasingly we're having colleagues and indeed former trainees from the curriculum participate as instructors. Here are two of our instructors, Rafe Brown and Dave Blackburn, doing an exercise with GPS units around Buea in Cameroon. And here they are doing some very hands-on work with herpetological specimens when we were in the field in Korup National Park. So it's tempting to essentially say that we can do everything via these courses, but again, with colleagues, I came to realize that there were more perhaps basic capacities that needed to be documented and enabled, but weren't going to happen as part of the courses, at least with the existing funding. And so we've started developing additional modules that we can put online, and yet we don't necessarily have to go to the huge expense of putting together a course with in-person interactions. So already online we have modules on how to publish scientific papers and how to prepare funding proposals. And coming up fairly soon, we have modules on using GIS, using QGIS, which is a very nice open source program. Statistical analysis in R in biodiversity informatics. A more general course on biostats. And we're hoping to do a module specifically on one program called Estimate S, which is perhaps the best program for developing inventory statistics. And so these modules, this is one of the first ones that we developed. You can see in this image They're online, they're videos, they're training materials, and you can also see we've got this one subtitled. This is one of the ones that we've tested our crowdsourcing on, and so we've done the transcription into English subtitles and then crowdsourced the translation into, in this case, French. So, just teaching materials are not the whole picture. Certainly, you will be aware of the scientific literature. And one thing that we found was that there wasn't really a central place for conversations about biodiversity informatics. There are other sources, other venues, but really there wasn't anything that was a focused venue on biodiversity informatics. So we more than 10 years ago started, Jorge Soberon and Rob Guralnick and I started this journal, Biodiversity Informatics. And essentially this is just an open access online journal. It has no subscription costs and it has no publication costs. It's just a resource. And this is very flexible. For example, this journal will be hosting the special issue that's resulting from the National Biodiversity Diagnoses course. You'll start seeing those papers quite soon. And the journal is, of course, open to other contributions. So if you have contributions to the journal, you're certainly welcome to submit them. We have a Facebook page, a group that now has almost 2,550 members. And all it is a forum for information about biodiversity informatics. What's going on, what's happening, courses, fellowships, scholarships, opportunities, new data resources, what have you. Anybody is welcome to contribute. And in fact, I find that colleagues who are part of the group are indeed now perhaps contributing more than I am to it, which is wonderful because it creates a community. So please join the Facebook group. You can see the link at the top, and I will put this PDF online on the Google Plus page at the end of this talk. We also have a dedicated web page. Some of you will have noticed that it shall we say, hit a bump in the road, which is to say our hosting service did some technology changes on us and caused quite a bit of extra work for my co-director, Kate Ingenloff, who maintains the web page. But essentially, you can see the web page gives you a direct route into the curriculum, into this seminar series that this talk is part of, into the courses and into resources. And you can see the links to the online seminars and news about our upcoming courses. So this is another resource that you can access. This talk is part of the Global Online Seminar Series, and it's essentially one time a month. We hold it the final Thursday of every month. Although I know I'm well aware of the fact that today is Friday. Simply yesterday was not going to work for me to give this talk. So I moved it a bit, but we try to aim for the last Thursday of every month. We have a YouTube channel, which is the most direct way of having access to the videos that get posted. And you can see there are more than 580, well, there are 580 subscribers to the YouTube channel. It also gives a very interesting view on the usership. This is usership only of the YouTube channel per se, not of, for example, Google Plus, where some of you are watching. But essentially, you can see amazing amounts of viewership. Essentially, we have had more than a half year of viewing of project videos, more than 50,000 individual occasions in which somebody has viewed one of the project videos. So this is quite a bit of usership of this project. Okay, so that's a bit of a view of what we are doing. We should talk a little bit about what is coming up. In December of this year, we are planning our next course, which is Implementing Conservation. That'll be held in Ethiopia. It's still in a planning stage, but very soon we will be announcing the course formally and requesting your applications. I will announce that via the Facebook group and via the project website, so please be watching for that. In 2016, we're hoping to hold 1 or 2 additional courses, and those will be the final courses with the current JRS funding. But essentially, these are courses that may take on some interesting next dimensions, like establishing baselines and designing robust protected areas systems for climate change, measuring ecosystem services, etc. We are very much open to suggestions for course topics. So that can be one thing where you can help Kate and me out with good ideas about what topics have we missed, or what topics would be most useful to you. So plans into the future. I'm hoping quite soon to start a very serious effort to transcribe all of the audio associated with all of the videos, to create English subtitles for all of the video that we've put up against more than 800 videos, and then set up a .sub crowdsourcing platform. We have it set up basically, but get a community of interested people, perhaps just people who are going to watch the videos anyway and could do the translation as part of their detailed viewing. But we'd like to translate the English subtitles into a whole suite of additional languages. We certainly need to update the original swath of courses periodically, and we have a number of ways of doing that. In fact, this global online seminar series is one way that we can do that. Essentially, this seminar series allows us to identify new ideas and new topics and make those available to the broader community. They kind of have to be things that are doable in an hour. We can update and rework older courses or courses in topics in which perhaps the field is evolving quickly. And we can develop new courses when new ideas and new approaches come to be. So certainly those are amongst our future plans. A second level of future planning is that this can broaden. This can be extended to other fields such as molecular systematics or taxonomy. I have to say I'm a bit remiss because I left out our public health applications course, which is already developed and already online. And I left that out of the set of topics that I presented earlier. We've certainly discussed in-person courses taught directly in French or in Portuguese or in Spanish or whatever the language that is of interest. My own language capabilities are only Portuguese and Spanish, but that doesn't mean that I even have to be involved. This concept could be extended into these other dimensions quite profitably, in fact. Ideally, and this is a long-term, perhaps at the level of dream, is a network of graduate programs for trainees who really want to continue in this field. But a major challenge there is to find the funding for that. Now, two ideas that are very closely allied to one another, but I think they're very much worth my throwing them out in a little bit more detail. But two ideas are a certificate program and or even a master's degree program. And so I'll take just a moment to give you a bit of detail on this idea. A certificate could be developed basically just as a documentation that a person has basic familiarity with the topics that have been treated in the training curriculum. The advantages of an international certificate is that it can be done basically quickly and easily. It could be done completely online, and it can be done essentially at no cost to the participant. Certainly a disadvantage is that it has no real status. If we had a flock of people with this certificate who are shining stars in biodiversity informatics, certainly it would take on a status of its own. But I don't think that necessarily it's something that you could use as a formal documentation. But again, this is something that can be done quite easily and quite readily. At a second level, we're at least exploring the idea of a master's degree in biodiversity informatics. And what we're exploring is essentially somewhat more detailed documentation that a person has a higher level ability in biodiversity informatics. Now, obviously, for a master's degree, we'd have to be talking about testing at some point. We can't do this completely online, perhaps, or not easily. And this is going to require some low level of costs, although perhaps it could be subsidized externally. But one could imagine a university or universities in different regions serving as the platform for granting these degrees. And obviously that university will want to recover some low level of costs. We're negotiating with one university in Latin America where the costing could be quite reasonable and accessible. But because of the possibility of in-person testing, we would probably also have to set up a series of universities that could do this sort of hosting of the degree program. So essentially we have these two ideas. They're not mutually exclusive, which is to say both could be done, both could be implemented. I'll give you just the prior examples. They're not so online and digital, but two prior examples that are done via Kew Gardens. So this is not a completely new idea, but it may be an interesting idea. So either via questions that you send me basically right now, or by email and by discussion on the Google Plus page or on the Facebook group, I would very much appreciate your input as far as what would these programs ideally look like, how would they function, what details might I not be thinking about that might be perhaps pitfalls. Just essentially any ideas or input that you might have would be very useful and very much appreciated, particularly about this question of master's degree versus international certificate. So what can you do? Well, certainly we would very much appreciate your spreading the word about the BITC resources and activities to other biodiversity scientists and students. And perhaps the best route into those resources and activities are the Google Plus community and the Facebook group. And I've already told you about the project website and the YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera. Once our efforts at translating and subtitling get underway, volunteers who are interested in essentially enabling language access for others would be enormously helpful. And then again, to any degree that you're able to offer suggestions about the future course of this program or its descendants. Essentially, what would you love to see next? What would be most useful? Would be very, very helpful to this project. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. This was intended as a fairly short seminar. As I told you at the beginning, without science content, more just an update on the training curriculum and a bit of a request for your input and support. One last note that I should make is I've come to appreciate a bit of an, shall we say, a digital divide phenomenon still existing, in which YouTube videos are not always visible. And so we are, at this moment, publishing in a sense of informal publication, but we're developing essentially just USB keys that include the whole curriculum as it stands right now. So that's kind of a version 1.0, and we'll be making those available in the next few weeks via means to be announced on the Facebook group page and the Google Plus page. So the project directors are myself and Kate Ingenloff, who is a doctoral student here at the University of Kansas. We have a project email, which is the easiest and best way to contact us, and that email is on the screen right now. So that's essentially what I was hoping to pass on to you. It's a pretty neat time, I think. I see one question coming in from my friend and colleague, Rob Anderson. And Rob is asking a question. Let me see, where can I see this question? Hold on, Rob, I'll be right with you. Let me unshare. And let's see. Oh, this is me again, sorry. So Rob is asking, how can modules and lectures be integrated, I'm assuming, into the BITC, the Biodiversity Informatics training curriculum, from courses that are conducted outside of the series that essentially my group is conducting in Africa. And that's a very good question because Rob, amongst others, amongst many others, but many groups have been developing training courses that offer very rich additional information. It may be, for example, a topic that we've already treated. For example, there have been other courses on niche modeling. And I can think of nothing richer than to be able to sit and watch 3 different courses or 5 different courses taught by many different authorities. And then there are also certainly courses to be taught on topics that we have not treated. For example, there's an announcement this morning from Donat Agosti, also a colleague and friend, of a course on capturing biodiversity data from published information using informatics techniques. And that's not part of the BITC program, but could be a very, very interesting addition to it. So essentially, there are all these course activities going on. I think it's very easy to link into them or to contribute those course materials to the BITC. Essentially, we have a series of Google Sheets that are the curriculum. And those can be added to with essentially no effort, such that when a course is captured digitally, it can be added essentially just by contributing the links to where those digital videos are housed. Probably I should, or somebody should, shall we say, chaperone the integration of video materials, because there are some video materials that would not be welcome. From time to time we have sunglasses advertised on the Facebook page, and from time to time we have little bits of inappropriate material that somebody sees fit to post. And we remove it as instantly as we're able, but we certainly want to keep the actual curriculum as clean as possible. So I'm certainly happy to be the gatekeeper in a very inclusive sense, but adding in that information is quite easy. Now, one other comment that comes to mind is a bit of a reflection on how to do the capture. And that is a bit of a challenge, and Kate and I have explored several routes. For example, what we do at our in-person training courses in Africa is simply digital video of every minute of the week or 2 weeks of the courses. And that's quite intensive. Usually Kate does most of the actual videotaping. And then I do the editing of the videos once we get back to Kansas. That is a lot of work for very worthwhile courses by other groups. I am willing to do some of the editing simply because it's something that I've figured out how to do, but it would have to be a topic that is quite central to biodiversity informatics training curriculum. A second means that can be used is Google Plus Hangouts on Air. This is the platform that we use to do our public health applications course. And it requires a very stable internet connection, but it is a very interesting potential because you don't have to spend the money to get your experts all together in one place. And then finally, you can also essentially do screen videos and such, where it's not broadcast, but you create the digital content and then put it up on the web, perhaps by YouTube. So Rob, that was probably much more of an answer than you'd been hoping for, but thanks for a very good question, and that was your punishment. Got a question come in just now from John Wieczorek, who has contributed very, very fundamentally to this project. He's been an instructor in 2 courses and a huge support. So he starts with an unmerited compliment. You've done a phenomenal job of capturing courses given live. But then he goes on to his question. Another level of training would be to create interactive teaching courses, which is a very different beast. Do you have an appreciation at this point about whether the effort to make courses rather than recordings of them is worth the degree of effort that it would require? And a very simple answer, John, is no, I don't know. I think that you're very correct that the capturing the courses given live is a static solution, which is to say the student who is not at the course on location basically just gets to sit and watch and doesn't necessarily get to participate and ask questions and test herself or himself. We've made every effort to make them interactive in that static sense. I personally do see a lot of value in seeing people teach and seeing people respond to questions. And so in that sense, I really like capturing live courses. But I'm not going to suggest or even dream that we're doing as good a job as could be done if some real serious expertise in distance education could be brought to bear. And I'm very open to that. And in fact, if there are people out there who are interested in that, I would love to have a conversation about that, or a series of conversations. I guess I'm to some degree at my capacity with what we're doing right now. So I certainly can't add that in at this point, but I'm very interested in collaborating with people who might be able to add that in. I think that's all I'm seeing as far as questions. Oops. No, I've got a question here. Okay, from Luis Escobar at the University of Minnesota. Luis is asking, could the YouTube videos be organized and described briefly to share with students and colleagues? He says it's a bit hard to choose among the diversity of videos available. Okay, that's very true, Luis. And in fact, the YouTube channel is getting frightening because there's so many resources that, yeah, indeed, it's pretty confusing. So let me take you on a quick tour of the web page. So I'm going to share the screen again, and I'm going to go over to Google Chrome, although any internet browser at least should work. And we're going to go to this site, biodiversity-informatics-training.org. And you know, I showed you this already in the slide presentation. But essentially, we have our list of courses, we have our seminar series, but here's what I really want you to see, this BI curriculum. And so this page essentially gives you a window into all of the videos that are organized by topics. So for example, we could be interested in, let's say, national biodiversity diagnoses. And remember I mentioned the Google Sheets. Well, here's that sheet. And so this is the course we did in Entebbe in Uganda in January. And you can see that the teaching was done mostly by myself and Arturo Ariño. But essentially, that course broke down into an introduction, a set of units on data cleaning. Essentially, don't do a diagnosis on dirty data, because you're going to get garbage out in the same measure that you put garbage in. And then the third unit was essentially on doing the diagnosis. So imagine, and in fact soon you will see published in the Biodiversity Informatics journal, imagine a publication that talks about the state of knowledge of the birds of Kenya, or the staphylinids of Costa Rica. And essentially, how would you go about doing such a diagnosis? Or we can go back to our topic list. Let's see, let's go to capturing data. And, capturing data. And so here we have a course where thankfully I did less and less of the teaching. And you can see that had introduction, it had data structure and data modules. You can see John Wieczorek there as one of the instructors, database management systems, biodiversity capture, data capture strategies and workflows, et cetera, et cetera. So Luis, I think this, this website gives you the more organized window that perhaps you were asking for. So I think that I've run out of questions, but I'm going to check before I sign off. Yeah, I think that's it. So let me unshare the screen so I finish this up with a view of my pretty face. But essentially, that's the Biodiversity Informatics training curriculum. Kate and I co-direct this effort, and we would very much appreciate your input and your ideas. And in fact, if you have the energy and the interest, we'd very much appreciate your participation in making this grow and continue. So please, let's not stop this conversation via the Biodiversity Informatics training curriculum pages. Again, various, the Google Plus page, the Facebook group, and via the biodivtraining@gmail.com. Give us your feedback. It's much appreciated and much needed. And I'll look forward to hearing from you and learning from you. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and I'll be announcing a 16th Global Online Seminar in coming days. Okay, all the best.